Hello. So I'm just going to go through the Scrapy project I most recently did and made a 1 hour 55 video on, and I ran it on the Raspberry Pi, and I just thought I'd go through some of the commands I used on the Raspberry Pi, and if you want to copy it or use your own Raspberry Pi, I thought I'd just provide you with a bit of background information, and I'll just show you some of the bits and pieces that I referred to and that I use. So yeah, let's begin. So I've documented this on my website redandgreen.co.uk. Configure a Raspberry Pi for web scraping. And what I did was I broke it down into the basic steps. Now, if you're interested in how I set up the Raspberry Pi Zero and why I used it, and all the commands that I used, configure a Raspberry Pi for web scraping. There we go. So, set up the Pi Zero. Let's go through the steps. 3 basic steps. Set up the VPN. Now, if you've got a proxy, then you don't need to worry about that. I wanted to use the VPN because if I got blocked, then at least I'd be able to go in and change that and change it from London to Manchester, or I didn't want to get my main router's IP blocked because that might compromise my coding in the future. Set up the VPN. So I needed to install a private VPN client. I've already subscribed to a VPN service, so I just needed to install the software on the Raspberry Pi and then just verify that I was connected to the VPN provider rather than just to my service provider. I'll explain that a bit in a minute. So then I ran Scrapy. I collected 57,005 records. I ran it using nohup, because I didn't want I didn't use cron because it was a one-off. So what I did was I ran it from PuTTY, and you'll see that in a minute, and then I didn't want it to quit when I exited PuTTY, so that's the reason why. And then checking the output, so it's a headless Raspberry Pi Zero, so I could have do less or head or top. I could have shown the CSV output on the Pi, but not in the fluffy format that we're used to with Excel or LibreOffice. So main considerations: could it run Scrapy on? Could the Raspberry Pi run Scrapy without issue? Well, there was only one way to find out. Could it run with a VPN connection? Well, that all depended upon whether I could get my VPN, the specific VPN provider that I use, could I get that to work on the Pi Zero? Now, depending on which VPN provider you subscribe to, there's limitless combinations of settings and config files, so you may need to RTFM on that and consult your VPN provider. I use private VPN, and you'll see in a minute how I set that up. Would it be able to store the results? Well, yeah. Was I going to fill up the memory on I think it was a 16 gigabyte memory card on the Raspberry Pi Zero, so my test was 50,000 records. So that's the video of the entire project, minus the VPN setup, which is what we're looking at today. So the first command that I used was df-h. So anyone This applies to Linux or Mac users here, really. No, it doesn't. It applies to the Raspberry Pi users. What am I on about? df-h, disk free, space -h. I think the H means human readable. So on my Pi Zero, 15 gig, 4.7 and 9.3, used and available. 9.3 gigabytes available on the Raspberry Pi Zero, so that was looking promising. The other things I needed to worry about was whether the swap file or the temporary file was going to be big enough, and again, one way to find out. So before I could really test it, VPN. So the VPN enables you to connect the Raspberry Pi to your VPN service provider with a tunnel. So the traffic is encrypted between your Raspberry Pi and the VPN service provider. The traffic that hits the site that you're scraping, thinks that the traffic's coming from your VPN service provider, not from your actual bt.com, sky.com, whatever, your home broadband. So your home broadband will be fine if the site you're scraping decides to block your Raspberry Pi, because your Raspberry Pi is using a different IP address than your home router. You'll see that in a second. Sudo apt-get update, sudo apt-get privatevpn.com client ca.crt, certificate of authority. Now that's something you'll need with with all VPN clients, and if you subscribe to a private VPN service, they will provide you with that. Next, I needed to also get the install.sh, which they provided. I just needed to use wget. Wget is a bit like apt-get, but yeah, it's not a distribution specific command. It just gets files from HTTPS links. Install.sh, chmod, change it to executable. apt-get install OpenVPN curl. So OpenVPN is what the private VPN config and everything is built on top of. So private VPN Linux OpenVPN installer version 0.3. Put in your username and your password. So that's effectively what you're doing, is you're setting up a command line version of, or text version of, what you probably will be having done automatically for you when you run an installer or whatever that you would get with your private VPN or your own VPN service. So effectively we're doing manually what their installer does for you when you install it on a Windows PC or a Mac. So etc. OpenVPN. Then you need to go in and just edit the server list. Now the server list is again, it's specific to your VPN provider. Mine has servers all over the world, which is nice. So potentially if you wanted to pretend you are accessing the site you're scraping, you could pretend that you're accessing it from Taiwan or Bolivia or Peru or Australia. Obviously the latency time goes up if you're pretending to be from the other side of the world, so probably not wise. Sudo micro etc. vpn.conf, add the server details. So effectively what you need to just do is edit private.vpn.conf and add the IP address of the server that you want to connect to. Next, if you run the VPN from the Raspberry Pi, or you make the connection from the Pi, chances are you're going to be connected to the Raspberry Pi, if it's a headless one, which I'd probably recommend, what's the headless one? Headless one is where you don't have a GUI, so just install a distro that allows you to access it via the command line. That's all you need. Because of that, when you access it via PuTTY, you can run the VPN, but as soon as you exit PuTTY, it'll kill the process and it'll stop, which is no good. So nohup. Nohup allows the process to keep running even after you quit your terminal or you quit PuTTY. Nohup, N-O-H-U-P. Google it and have a read up on it, as I'm not going to go into it anymore here. The next thing is, once you've got the VPN established, you want to just check that the connection from the Pi 0 to the outside world is going through the VPN tunnel. It's not going through, it's not appearing as if it's coming from your home router. The tunnel, remember, is from your Raspberry Pi to your VPN service provider, and it's like a long bit of pipe that nothing sees into, and effectively you're pretending that your Raspberry Pi is actually at the location of the VPN service provider. So what you can do is get the IP address of your home router. You can just go to whatsmyip.com. Mine began with 90.something.something.something. That's an IPv4 address, because that's everything we're talking about here is IPv4. Don't worry about IPv6. To check that your Raspberry Pi is connected on the VPN and is appearing as if it's coming from the VPN, what you need to do is do curl curl space ifconfig.me. ifconfig.me is actually a domain which will return the IP address which you've approached, the source IP address that you used. So just make sure curl ifconfig.me, make sure that is different to the address that you get on, for instance, your Windows PC or your Mac when you're attempting to check your router's address. You can always go onto your router and you can find in your router, you'll see what your public IP address is on your router, but it's a lot easier just to do it through whatsmyip.com or similar site. Right, so next, run the Scrapy Spider. So how do we do that? Well, microphone. Make a note to get a proper microphone. To get the code onto your Raspberry Pi, you could potentially copy and paste it into your favorite editor like Nano or Micro or whatever, but you need to install something called Xclip, it's a paperclip. It's like a copy and paste feature. A much better way to do it is just to clone my code or clone your own code if you've written a spider and installed it on GitHub. And git clone https github.com rggh scrapy6.git. Once you've cloned it, you'll have a folder or directory on your Raspberry Pi which will be called Scrapy6, and inside, that's what it'll be called if you clone my code. If you clone your own code, it will be called whatever you've called your repository on GitHub. A repository is basically a directory where you store your code. Once it's all in place, run, just to recap, run sudo nohup private VPN, and then to run your spider, go to the directory where you've got Scrapy6, or the name, the directory that contains your spider file, your spider, and sudo python3 name of your spider.py. Now that is all made possible because I've imported crawler process, and I've done the main driver, the last 4 lines that you'll see on all of my Scrapy spiders. Without that, you would need to actually call the spider using Scrapy crawl spider name and then -o and then the output path and so on. So it's made a lot easier because I've made it into a script. So the last 4 lines, crawler process start, is what allows you to run it just using Python. But remember, nohup. And nohup there also. But if once you've started it running, that depends. If you use nohup, if you run it from PuTTY, if you're going to put it into cron, you wouldn't need that because it would run from inside the Pi rather than being started externally, i.e. from PuTTY on a Windows PC that you're logged into via SSH. If you're unfamiliar with all this that I'm talking about, basically what you need to do is set up your Raspberry Pi so that you can remotely connect to it. In the old days it used to be called Telnet, but nowadays you use a SSH secure shell and you're connecting to the Raspberry Pi remotely, and my Raspberry Pi Zero is the one that has Wi-Fi or wireless, so because that makes it then possible to remotely connect to it. If you're worried about the resources being used on the Raspberry Pi, you can type this command, htop, and it's the top, well, you can see CPU, memory and swap. The actual instant I took this screenshot, it was running, but it was actually not using much resource. But as you can see, the CPU was still at 100%, and that's fine. There's nothing to worry about. It will just run like that, and yeah, don't panic. Go away, go to bed, wake up the next day, check it again. You can see when it's running, if you do go into your directory and just keep doing ls -la, you'll be able to see the file size increasing. Now, how do you know when it's finished? Well, you could create a log file, a Scrapy log file, but if you don't want to do that, just keep checking the size of the file, and then 10 minutes later check it again, and if it's not changed, well, you know that it's finished writing to the CSV. My CSV was called something results.csv, so check output. Now you check you can SSH back onto the Pi, as I say, check the file size of the results.csv. If it's not changed, then you need to copy it to, well, you want to copy it somewhere where you can look at the data and analyze it and so on. So you can either use SCP, or I used rsync. And rsync basically synchronizes the files from a directory on the Pi, and it synchronizes those to a directory on your Linux machine. And you do source and destination, so it'll synchronize from the source to the destination. So if the destination is empty and the source has got a CSV in it, the CSV will be, you'll end up with it synchronized so you have the same CSV on the source and on the destination. There's a lot more to rsync, and there's a video available that I've done, just a short one, which you can see the link to on this article if you go to this article. So yeah, Scrapy output, there we go. 57,005, no, 57,004 recipes. Obviously the first line is the header. The CSV produced on the Raspberry Pi by Scrapy and my spider. And yeah, and there's the link to the rsync, quick rsync demo. You're probably better off experimenting with rsync and doing some dry runs. You can do a dry run where it effectively simulates what it will be doing. If you rsync the wrong way, you could potentially transfer an empty folder over to a full folder or directory, and then you'll end up with empty directories being on both So yeah, just watch out for that. Conclusion, I scraped 57,004 records in about 24 hours using a £10, which in dollars is, I think it's about $15, or probably might be less now. The amazing thing is that because it's so small, there's no fan, it's not like you've got to leave a large PC on, and the brilliant thing is it actually runs fairly slowly, which means you won't get blocked. So really, if you can wait 24 hours and you're not in a hurry, well, take longer. The longer you take, the better, really, because you're not hitting the server so hard, and probably you're less likely to get blocked. So good. Watch the entire series here on YouTube. That was 1 hour 55 of me writing the code, testing it in Scrapy shell, and getting a successful test. A successful test based on about 3 or 4 pages, and then I quit. I cancelled it. And then I knew that it was good to go for a full-on 57,000 recipe test. I've also done 7 smaller videos which are the same actual video footage, but I've put on a lot more subtitles. So if you think, oh, he's just put the same video on, but he's done it, split it into 7, that's partially true, but the 7 individual videos have a lot more annotation, subtitles, and I hope that's made anything clear that is probably not been fully explained in the complete project. The complete project was kind of more as is, so gives you a feel for the debugging, and if the debugging and that side of things is just makes you want to skip ahead, then probably you're better off just looking at the 7 individual videos where you can pick the bits that you want, and say there's more captions and subtitles. So Raspberry Pi web scraping. I hope you've enjoyed this. And yeah, let me know. Please add some comments, and that's what it's all about. Comments, learning off each other. If you can recommend any improvements that I could make to this, or any different ideas, I'd be very keen to hear. So yeah, good luck with your web scraping, and I'll be back soon, and who knows what I'll be up to next.